And now an analysis of the current operational situation on the Pokrovsk front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. In the Pokrovsky direction, the occupiers carried out 24 assaults in the areas of the settlements of Malinovka, Lisovka, Inkotlino, Zverevo, Udaknoye, Novosergivka, Novoalexandrovka, Nadeyevka, Bogdanovka, Andreyevka, Ekudaiche, as well as in the directions of the settlements of Bogatyr, Oboz, Alexeyevka, Doko, Novaya Poltavka, Kotliarovka. The defense forces have repelled 19 attacks. 5 clashes are still ongoing. Meanwhile, in the Kherson region, the Russians may be preparing to storm the right bank. The Ukrainian armed forces in Chatern are once again breaking through in the Kursk region. Near Toretsk, the Ukrainian army is also advancing. And now the Russians are only 3 kilometers away from the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. We have gathered the latest news about what is happening on the front lines right now and analyzed which of these reports are accurate and which are not. Let's watch.
For several days now, Russian war correspondents and Z channels have been claiming that the Ukrainian armed forces have launched an offensive near the village of Tetkino and the settlement of Popovo-Leżachi in the Glushkovsky district. Not so long ago, Russian generals were saying that they had driven the Ukrainian armed forces out of the Kursk region. But it turns out the Ukrainian army is once again on Russian soil.
The enemy has launched a new offensive in the Kursk region, trying to cut off Tetkino. At night, the enemy blew up bridges with missiles and in the morning sent armored groups into the attack. First, mine-clearing vehicles began making passages through the minefields, followed by armored vehicles carrying troops. There is heavy fighting on the border. Our paratroopers and other units are destroying the enemy.
The Russian Federation redeployed part of its troops from the Kursk region to other directions. And it seems that the Ukrainian armed forces took advantage of the element of surprise and launched a new counterattack in the Kursk region.
When Gerasimov reported to Putin that they had completely liberated the Kursk territory, that did not correspond to reality. But we withdrew, and they pulled out a large number of forces and equipment. There were up to 90,000 parts of them on a relatively small section of the front. They were moved to the Kharkiv, possibly the Pokrovsk direction, and now our actions near Tyotkino, a counterattack in response. Alexei Hetman, military analyst.
In the Kherson region, Russian occupiers are beginning preparations for an airborne operation. Since the end of April, the Russian army has been attempting to land troops on small islands that are currently under the control of Ukrainian defense forces.
The enemy is trying to create a water barrier to form straits in the southern part of the Dnipro area, where Bugas and Kozulisky Island are located, and to land troops on these islands, establish a small bridgehead there and carry out a crossing of the Dnipro in Mo, this southern zone.
The Russian army plans to gradually seize the islands, which will allow them to expand the area of engagement for Russian equipment. Preparations are underway for an amphibious operation, particularly involving unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, as well as mortars.
Enemy vehicles appear there from time to time. There are multiple launch rocket systems, and from there we are also subjected to a large number of attacks on the city of Ochakiv in the Mykolaiv region. What does this operation give the Russian side? The more islands they manage to capture, the more firing positions they will have closer to our rear areas.
The Ukrainian command of the Defense Forces South is aware of such plans and maneuvers, and they are monitoring the movement of literally every boat and every mortar. At present, the enemy does not have enough watercraft or personnel in the Kherson direction to carry out such a large-scale assault. The most tense area on the front right now is the border between Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Syrskyi, wrote that the Pokrovsk direction is one of the most difficult sections of the Russian-Ukrainian war front. According to him, the Defense Forces soldiers were able to stabilize the situation in this operational zone in Donetsk region and in some places even seize the tactical initiative.
According to the data from the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the intensity of combat operations has increased significantly over the past week. In just 6 days this week, there have already been 1,219 attacks compared to 1,150 over 7 days last week. The enemy was most active this week on the Pokrovsk sector. 42% of all attacks occurred there. High intensity also remains on the Novopavlivka sector, 13.7%, Nagol, the Lyman sector, 12.7%, and the Kurakov sector, 12%. Altogether, these 4 directions account for 80% of all enemy assault actions.
Despite the fact that the Russian army is only 2.5 kilometers away from the administrative border of the Dnipropetrovsk region, the front in this sector remains stable, and the Ukrainian armed forces are in control. The occupiers' advance in this direction has been halted.
And now it's time to analyze the current situation on the Kharkiv, Kupiansk, and Lyman fronts. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill, and maim. On the Kharkiv front, the aggressors launched assaults 6 times near the settlements of Vovchansky, Kotori, and Kamenka. Currently, 4 clashes are ongoing. On the Kupiansk front, the enemy launched assaults 3 times near Hlushkivka and Novokrugliakivka. On the Lyman front, the Russians advanced 9 times near the settlements of Kopanki, Rakivka, and Kolodyazi, as well as towards Redkodub, Novyimir, and Olhivka. 3 clashes are still ongoing. And of course, this week has once again been hellishly difficult for Ukrainian Kharkiv. The enemy attacks the city almost every day. As a result of a massive Russian drone attack on the morning of May 6th, a fire broke out at Barabashovo, the largest market in the city. Also, 6 people remain hospitalized after a nighttime attack on Kharkiv a few days earlier. The occupiers once again used drones with thermobaric warheads, which caused massive destruction of structures and numerous injuries to people, often incompatible with life. A total of 51 victims sought medical assistance. Damage has been recorded in 4 Nuts districts of the city. TSN correspondent Yulia Boyko will tell you more about the consequences of the terrible, brutal night attack.
This is the Slobidskiye district of Kharkiv. It was here that a kamikaze drone struck directly at parked cars. As a result of the explosion, a fire broke out that took several hours to extinguish. At this moment, the only reminders of the night attack here are a burned-out car, shattered windows in the houses, and a damaged shop. This is just one of the locations where Shahed struck during the night. A total of 17 drones. 4 districts of the city came under attack. Private houses, apartment buildings, and infrastructure facilities were damaged.
It was very frightening, really frightening. If I hadn't left 5 minutes earlier, I don't even know what would have happened to me. Everything is covered in glass. Do you see how much we're carrying out? Look, I live on the 6th floor. Those are my 2 windows. Thankfully, I went out into the hallway. All the windows were blown out. We heard the shahids. At first, we just heard the sound and went out into the hallway. Then we could hear them exploding and the windows shattering.
At one of the locations, an explosive object was found, likely an unexploded charge. Right now, bomb disposal experts are examining it. They suspect it could be a cluster munition, similar to those used in the recent attack on Kiev.
After a similar charge was found in Kiev, we need to be extremely careful, because anything is possible. And until the bomb disposal experts have finished their work, no one should come near, pick anything up, or even be nearby.
According to the latest information, 51 people have sought medical assistance, 14 of them with injuries from glass shards. Others are experiencing acute stress reactions. 6 of the injured remain in city hospitals, including an 11-year-old child. Throughout the night, ambulance crews and rescue workers were on site where the strikes occurred. Despite the threat of repeated attacks, assistance centers for victims are currently operating in the city. Utility workers, bomb disposal experts, and the State Emergency Service are all on duty.
And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the Kramatorsk and Toretsk fronts. The enemy, as usual, he is acting ferociously here as well. On the Kramatorsk front, our defenders are currently repelling 2 attempts by the occupiers to advance near Bilahora and Chasiv Yar. 4 clashes have been successfully concluded. On the Toretsk front, the enemy attacked 8 times near Shcherbinivka and Toretsk, as well as in the direction of Hlivitske. 1 clash is still ongoing. The war is changing, and it is changing very significantly and very quickly. Aerial and ground drones are transforming the battlefield. Gray zones will most likely expand due to the range of drone operations. While aerial drones have long become an integral part of the Ukrainian armed forces units, ground drones are only now being introduced to Ukrainian defenders. But this is happening very quickly, as there is an enormous need for them. The thing is, ground drones are used both for evacuation and for delivering ammunition. These drones also make life easier for sappers, who no longer have to carry heavy anti-tank mines by hand. Ground drones also assist. The infantry, as a machine gun mounted on a drone, can now provide cover from a certain distance. All the details are in the report by TSN journalist Ihor Bondarenko.
Fartovi artistically squeezes mayonnaise onto a loaf for a tasty sandwich. He has just returned from the front line. For an infantryman, this is one of the toughest tasks in war. The journey to the position and the return from the line of engagement.
Constantly 300 and much more than 200 when entering and exiting.
Each soldier carries dozens of kilograms of gear, ammunition, and provisions, hauling several kilos to the trench under shelling and FPV drone attacks. The number of casualties during such marches keeps increasing. But despite this, Ukrainian soldiers have found a way to make life easier for the infantry. Ground robots have come to the rescue.
Ground robotic systems can take over, in fact, the main functions performed by infantry soldiers. What do I mean by that? Sorry. Logistics, evacuation, mining, demining, surveillance, fire support, and destroying the enemy as kamikaze units.
Combat brigades of the Ukrainian armed forces have been successfully using ground robots on the front lines for almost a year, delivering ammunition and food, evacuating wounded and fallen soldiers. There have already been hundreds of such operations involving ground drones. However, the main task is to destroy the enemy. And robots are capable of that as well. This kind of machine can lay mines on an area many times faster than a sapper. Anti-personnel mines are capable of slowing down the enemy's advance or stopping a sudden breakthrough. And the main danger for the sapper is now taken on by the drone.
If we didn't have them, we would have to do all this by hand. Before drones, everything had to be done manually. Now that we have drones, all the work is done by them.
Ukrainian developers went even further and made the mechanized platform universal. In addition to transporting cargo, evacuation, and mining, the smart wheel can also clear mines, conduct reconnaissance, and provide surveillance. Engineers spent only 6 months developing the drone.
We have speed and motivation because we not only have to survive, we have to defeat the enemy. For that we need stable technologies, and they must be our own.
Just a year ago, only about a dozen Ukrainian companies were developing robotic ground systems for the Ukrainian military. The government purchased only 600 robots. This year, under contract, there are 8,000.
There were 12 or 13 at the beginning of 24. At the beginning of 25, we can state that we have more than 60 manufacturers of ground robotic systems. Each manufacturer has at least 3 or 4 models for different uses, such as mining, demining, logistics, relay stations, and even electronic warfare equipment is being installed.
More than 100 foreign companies from 25 countries around the world are lining up not to sell their developments to Ukraine, but because they want to learn from Ukrainian experience and jointly produce new models of ground robots which are immediately tested in combat conditions. Kamikaze drones and drones equipped with turrets are already actively destroying enemy fortifications and enemy personnel. Ukrainian engineers and military personnel predict that ground drones are capable of changing the nature and even the course of the war, just as strike drones once did.
We have a very clear objective. It's called a kill zone, a place the enemy simply won't enter. How we will achieve this with the help of UGVs, time will tell.
Oleksandr Yabchenko notes that robots will not be able to fully replace infantry, but they can significantly ease the conduct of war. The technology race will be won by whoever adapts and scales up ground systems across the entire front line the fastest. There is no longer any doubt. Ukraine is becoming a key military force capable of protecting Europe from Russian darkness. And now we move to the Novopavlivka, Huliaipol, and Kharkiv sectors of the front. Here too the situation is, as usual, extremely tense. In the Novopavlivka direction, our soldiers repelled 12 attacks near Konstantinopil, Novoselki, Volnepol, and towards Novopil, Bohatyr, and Otradne. One engagement is still ongoing. In the Huliaipol direction, one attempt by the invaders to advance near Vysok was successfully stopped. At the same time, the aggressors carried out airstrikes on Malinivka, Vysoky, and Huliaipol. In the Kharkiv direction, the armed forces of Ukraine stopped 4 assaults near Stepov and Kamyanske.